Welcome in to the NSFW Dynasty podcast. Once again, I am your host, Dave Reed, joined by my co-host, Ryan Wilkinson and Joey Gallo.
How you guys doing? Ready to talk some ball?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the podcast.
Love the enthusiasm, boys. We are officially in spooky season, which means we are a month into the NFL season, 4 weeks down, and things are getting a bit clearer of who is performing and who is disappointing so far. And we are also seeing in our leagues the trajectory of some of the teams and who's going to be contender and who might be selling out and rebuilding for next year. But I do want to say, if you're 0-4 or 1-3, that does not mean you're out of it just yet. Oftentimes, teams just get very unlucky. You can still be a very strong team, and you just got to stick it out and keep pushing through, finding ways to grind out wins throughout the rest of the season. There's plenty of stories. I know I've had a bunch myself. Ryan can probably speak to one from one of our other leagues of a team who started off slow, and I'll let Ryan finish that story.
Yeah, I mean...
no names, though. No names.
I'm going to give this guy credit by saying his name, but I was once defeated in the championship game by a guy that went 5-9 in the regular season. So anything can happen. Like you said, if you're 0-4, 1-3, you're definitely not out of it. Still plenty of time in the season to make a comeback.
Yes, if you were 5-9, you can get very lucky and win the championship.
Yes.
That had nothing to do with skill. Not giving that guy any credit. And that thing being said, though, this is definitely about the time in the seasons in dynasty leagues where teams start deciding this is when they're going to just sell out for next year and start rebuilding. And this is also where teams who are contenders I'm going to go all in. So this is when you start seeing some trade talks happening. The action starts happening in your dynasty league. The only reason I say that is get involved, be active, start reaching out to these teams, because the worst thing that happens, especially in Dynasty, when you see a trade go down that you thought, oh, I would have offered more than that, or why didn't I know about that? So you got to get involved, reach out to the teams that you think may be tanking, and just get after it. But listen to this podcast. Hopefully we'll give you some information of who to be reaching out to. But with that being said, Joe, you want to jump in real quick?
No, I would just say, what I try and do is just kind of take a look at my team and evaluate the future of some of the guys. And, any team can win in any given year, but if you have guys on your team that are, like Travis Kelce's, I put Travis Kelce on the trade block in a league that I'm in. I put Austin Eckler on the trade block in a league that I'm in. I find myself a contender in that league, but also, you also have to consider that the assets are some of the assets on your team are reaching expiration, and you want to also try to capitalize before their value kind of plummets. So it's the fun of playing Dynasty, but just kind of make sure you're taking a look at your league and your team and where you are in the league standings and evaluating the kind of course you want to take for the future. Because if you just do nothing, like Dave said, and let it sit, you could stay in purgatory forever, and you also won't have any fun.
Yeah, being stagnant in Dynasty is the death of your team. You gotta be active, and kind of to the point too. I've been hearing this on the fantasy football as well. This is when you should start seeing consolidation of veterans on contender teams and younger talent on the rebuilding team. So you start seeing those shifting of assets and ages moving from one team to another. Yeah. But with that said, we're going to dive in. As I mentioned, we are 4 weeks in and look back a little bit at what happened in week 4. Every week there are injuries that do occur. It's the brutal reality of the NFL. But with that does provide potential opportunities for certain players to step up, but it also does change the dynamic of other teams as well, sometimes for the good, sometimes for the bad. So I'm going to run through some names and kind of see what maybe the impact of some of these players could be. So T. Higgins got some fractured ribs. He could miss a couple weeks, could miss no time. This is kind of a pain tolerance thing, so we'll kind of see how that plays out. Kenny Pickett had a knee injury. People thought he was out for the year, then thought for a few weeks, and now he might play. So we'll see what goes on, but it did not look good when he was on the field healthy. So we'll see what happens with a hampered Kenny Pickett. Pat Freiermuth will not be there for Kenny Pickett. He is probably going to miss about 2 to 3 weeks with a hamstring. Mike Evans, he's on bye, so he does have time to recover, but he had a minor hamstring injury. He was seen on a bike trying to get back in the game, so it doesn't look like it could be too bad, and maybe the bye is enough to get him back in the field. Javonte Williams had a hip flexor, could miss no time. Maybe or at most will miss maybe a week or so. There's a name a lot of people I think. I don't even want to say the guy's name, Malaki, and I don't know. There's another guy who's very fast on the Broncos team that people are picking up, but we'll see if Javonte actually misses any time there. Justin Herbert fractured a finger on his left non-throwing hand. He's on bye, should be okay. He has actually played out the rest of the game, so no real concerns there. Amron St. Brown, he was dealing with turf toe, but apparently it's the abdomen now he missed practice on, so that's something to keep an eye on. Kyron Williams, he played into overtimes, but apparently got injured late in the game with a hip contusion. So we'll see if he can go this week. He did miss practice. But coming back, you got Jonathan Taylor is coming back, well, at least designated for return in practice today. And then Cooper Kupp was also designated to return to start practicing. These players both have a 21-day window to get back on the field and be active, but we'll see what happens. So, Joe, what are some, I guess, takeaways or players you want to call the situations that are going to change or the major impacts from here?
Yeah, so looking at the list, I think the one that kind of sticks out to me to have the most impact here, because he is in a situation where his injury concerns me and he's actually producing, is Mike Evans. He's had a history of these hamstring or in general kind of soft tissue injuries in the past that have sidelined him for 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks at a clip. It's great that they have the bye, because I'm sure he would try and get back out there next week if they were playing. The issue here is just re-injury, and then if he ends up with the more severe hamstring strain, and then you're losing him for 3 or 4 weeks, obviously it creates opportunity for the Chris Godwins of the world. But if you're counting on Mike Evans, you're really hoping that this is not something that lingers. T. Higgins, I think the whole Bengals offense is in some trouble. Pickett and Freiermuth are, again, the offense is not really doing much to begin with. And I'm just going to say it. I does Javonte Williams stink low-key this season so far? I mean, honestly, there was a lot of hype in the preseason. I bought in one of my leagues, and I'm just like, he's hurt, and maybe that's a blessing because I can stick him on my bench, and I can get somebody like Tutu Atwell in the flex who's actually scoring fantasy points. So, I mean, he looks healthy. It doesn't appear to be an injury-related situation. But I am not losing any sleep taking him out of my lineup. So
yeah, I agree because I have him a lot of places too, and I want him because he's playing, and you're like, oh, you just put him back out. That's what he is. But I don't know if he's fully back to Javonte yet. I mean, the recovery he had was miraculous as it is, but yeah, I got to stop starting him. He's until I start seeing something.
The second he went out, Jaleel McLaughlin went in there,
and McLaughlin, I couldn't get it,
and put up like 70 or 80 yards and scored a touchdown. And Samaje Perine is also probably burnt toast at this point. So if you ask me, like I think it's a situation where McLaughlin has the burst and the other two guys don't, and that's who I would want at this point, right? Going into waivers this week, he's the guy who I would have wanted to get of the two between he and Perine.
Or just Marvin Mims. Just throw it to Mims.
Yeah, well, that's another situation.
And I'll just take the other side of it. JT and Cooper Kupp coming back. I think it's interesting to see what happens with them because, to start the season, they're both superstars expected to make huge waves, but their teams have actually had a lot of production from guys in their positions. Zach Moss has produced with JT out. Will they continue to use Zach Moss, or does JT just take a full down, 3-back role again? And same thing with Cooper Kupp. They've, had some other receivers step up. So does he come in and automatically get all the targets that he's used to getting, or do they keep Tutu and Puka involved? And it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, I swear Cooper Cup hurt us last week when I said, like, I haven't heard anything about him. I don't think he's
Yeah.
coming back. He's like, oh, really? And then all of a sudden news started breaking. The JT one's weird because, like, is he gonna play for like? I still don't know what the situation with that's gonna be if he is gonna play if he wants to get traded. So it is murky. Like if he gets traded, Zach Moss wheels up still for the rest of the season. But definitely that'll be. I don't have any shares, so I'm like fine. I'm just gonna watch and let it happen. I have no Zach Moss or no JT, so it's purely entertainment for me. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if it was a situation where he goes out there and plays, and then he kind of like you see him kind of hampered on the injury report every week, and plays actually turns out to be more like, you know, barely plays but still accrues his year, his league year, which is important obviously from a contract perspective. But I don't know. A lot of the updates have been coming from the Colts and not from JT. So I'd be interested to hear an update from him that says he's actually going to play football for the Colts. But
And that's a good call. To accrue a year, he has to play 6 games this season. So he can't sit out the whole season. He'll be still under contract. But if he plays 6 games, then he will be a free agent.
yeah,
With that, though, I guess there was a lot of football to be played. There were some big performances. We'll definitely get into some key names a little bit later. But I guess overall, what were certain games or teams that you saw that kind of stood out? Maybe made a statement, or good or bad. I'll just call out right now. The Giants stink on ice, and I am no longer having any hope there. So dead inside. Moving on, but yeah, I don't know. Ryan, if there was any certain games that kind of stood out or performances you saw that you think really changed your opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could start with the Bills Dolphins game just because that was probably the most hyped up game of the week. And, the Bills put on a pretty dominating performance, 48-20 win. Josh Allen and Diggs both had huge fantasy weeks, which is always great to see. Um, I leave it to you guys. I was curious, do you think it was more of the Bills are really that good, or the Dolphins were a little overrated going into that, having put up 70 points?
my thought is that it was probably the spot more than anything else, right? Like the Bills are at home and they have the extra motivation of hearing how Miami is now like the team to beat in the division, and Miami's coming off a 70-point, drudging of Denver. So to me, it feels like maybe the spot. And I like, I think what'll happen is, like for the rest of the season, from like a power ranking perspective, I still say Buffalo is, marginally better than Miami. I don't think they're significantly better just as a result of this particular game. Although it's nice to see that when the Bills care, they still kind of have it in them. I think that was like something that we talked about earlier in the season where like Josh Allen was just kind of like going through the motions. And when you've made deep playoff runs for like, years consecutively, but you haven't gotten to win a Super Bowl, you can kind of like get bored out there. So when the Bills are trying hard, which they clearly were trying hard this week,
Yeah.
Yep.
they're still good.
Yeah.
And I will say the one other thing that we didn't mention when we talked about injuries, Tre'Davious White going down for the Bills. I think, we don't talk a lot about the defensive side, but that is a huge injury for them. And I do think kind of hurts their Super Bowl aspirations going forward, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean that defense is still very, very strong, and I think that's an edge the Bills have over the Dolphins. But obviously, losing a player like White, that changes how you scheme in like the plays that you call from the defensive side. But to Joe's point, like Josh Allen and the rest of the offense and Diggs, like they look fired up, like they had an extra motivation, and it's exciting to see because when they are on, like they're one of the most fun teams to watch too. It's just like so exciting. And Josh Allen, I would take. I'm not just me. It's not a bold take. Every single person would probably take Josh Allen over Tua, and I think that also kind of gives them the leg up in like the power rankings if you're comparing the two. Joe, what about you? Any games that stood out to you?
Yeah, I guess the two teams that kind of stick out. are Cincinnati and Philadelphia. I think Philly. I mean, as a Giants fan and just in general, I'm not a particular not someone who's particularly fond of Philadelphia. I think that they're being undervalued right now a little bit in the media. I think part of the dialogue and a lot of what I'm listening to and content that I'm consuming is kind of like what's wrong and why they haven't looked like they looked last year. But last year, I think maybe was the exception in terms of just the way they would dominate teams in the first half. And they still have some ground, I think, to make up this year relative to last year on the defensive side. I think their linebackers seem to be slower this year, and I think that's the area where they're kind of the hole right now on the defense. But just because they're not blowing teams out, the offense is still impressing me quite a bit. Every time DeAndre Swift touches the ball, he's going for 6 or 7 plus yards. He's been, I mean, if he can stay healthy, which has always been the thing with DeAndre Swift, I mean, he looks great. He doesn't even just look good. He looks very, very, very good.
Looks
And
very swift,
yeah, like
if
to
you
the
will.
point where, like, coming out of week one, we were like, oh wow, like Kenny Gainwell is the lead back here, and then Kenny Gainwell misses week two, and Swift puts up a really strong performance, and now Kenny Gainwell's probably getting like 30% of snaps. Like you can't possibly go away from somebody who's playing that well, and um, you know, I think that their passing game, sans Dallas Goddard, looks great. I mean, Devonta
Yeah.
Smith is doing Devonta Smith things. AJ Brown is doing AJ Brown things. Um, I think like part of what I was hearing on like the Bill Simmons podcast is like, bad play, bad play, bad play, and then a bomb to AJ Brown. That's not really what's happening. It's actually it's been better than that. So I think that for a team that is was in a tough spot coming into the season with that Super Bowl losing hangover situation, right? A lot of teams in that situation do have it down, like do kind of step back the year after. The fact that they are still kind of piecing it together, have been dealing with some injuries on defense, and are still 4-0, I think they're in a
Yeah,
good spot.
I,
I'd be happy if I was an Eagles fan.
yeah. I mean, we're a Giants fan, so I'd be happy to be almost any other fan. But yeah, I think the difference in kind of to your point, they're obviously still one of the best teams in the league, but the defense is just not like last year. The defense was like silly dominant. They're just not that right now. The D line is strong. But the secondary has been hampered with injuries. That like they're getting beat up on passes, which that did not happen last year. You can throw all over them. Like Sam Howell looked great against them. I do think Sam Howell's improved, but again, like he would not have done that last year. And I don't think the talent is as off. I think it's the offensive coordinator change. I don't think the play calling is as great, but also like, and I've been saying too, Jalen Hurts doesn't look as explosive and dominant, but he's also learning now a new offense. So that could be part of why he's a little bit uncomfortable. Is because of that change, and that is like a thing that happens to a lot of quarterbacks. So again, they didn't lose talent on the offensive side. If anything, they gained it. So I do think throughout the season they should improve, but I think those are probably the two main factors on the Eagles side.
Yeah, no, I agree. The coordinator stuff on both sides of the ball is tough.
Yeah, and then I know you mentioned the Bengals. They are just broken. I don't know, like
Yeah, and I don't see it getting better anytime soon, to be honest. I think you almost have to write this year off as if you're in the Bengals organization and if you're a fantasy manager who was counting on Bengals players to carry your team this year. I don't think that they're going to get better until Burrow has time to actually heal. I'm not sure that he's actually going to heal going out there and playing every week. Maybe miraculously after another 5 or 6 weeks of mediocrity, he starts to get to the point where he can throw the ball downfield again and starts putting up numbers. But I think the more likely scenario is they lose a couple more games and then he goes on the IR for 4 weeks. Maybe he doesn't even come back at all the rest of the season. They might just take this year as an old red shirt, which is unfortunate. But now T Higgins is dealing with rib issues, and yeah, it's not a good situation. I think
Yeah.
they have a week 7 bye. I was just looking up, so maybe after that things turn around. I don't know how long it would take for Burrow to finally get right, but I agree. Like until he's right, that team is not going to be right.
Yeah, and they get the Cardinals this week, so maybe they can, turn it around with a win there.
Frisky Cardinals.
Not looking so bad either. So,
Yeah,
it hasn't been great for the Bengals.
yeah.
I just think for whatever reason he can't throw the ball downfield, and the defenses know that he can't throw the ball downfield, so they're all just pinning like they can just kind of sit on whatever short routes he actually can throw, and
He also can't move in the pocket. Like he just is
no
like a sitting duck. Yeah.
It's brutal. It's tough to watch. It's tough to have on your team, and I mean it's part of why I am down on my team to do anything this year, because I'm going to need more from Jamar Chase that I think he's going to actually be able to give me.
I'm assuming though, long term in Dynasty, you're not changing your opinion on Jamar Chase. Yeah.
Or Burrow. I actually think there's probably a good opportunity to buy Burrow in Dynasty.
Agree.
Because, it sucks. They should have just put him on the IR at the beginning of the season. Not the best, but he'll be fine.
This is the mindset shift in Dynasty versus redraft. Like in redraft, yes, you probably have to dock those players a little bit, but Dynasty, these guys are still elite assets. It's a rough patch. You got to get through it. If you're a contending team and you feel like this is going to derail it, maybe try to figure out a workaround or a stopgap. But these are not guys you just like ship off for nothing.
Yeah.
Couple other quick hitters. The Lions look very strong, which is weird to say, but they look like a very good team after dismantling the Packers on Thursday night. And Montgomery, in my opinion, looking like a top 12 back now with the workload he's getting. The Bears, playing against the Broncos kind of just like helps you, I guess, makes you look real good. Fields had no rushing touchdowns, but he had 4 passing touchdowns, I think, and looked very good for most of the game. But in Bears fashion, they still lost. And I believe I saw a stat. The Bears are the only professional team to not have won a single game since Elon Musk completed the sale of Twitter. So that's not a great set. Elon is just bad luck for the Bears, I guess. The Rams did win. The Rams are like a surprisingly like decent team. Like Kyron, Joe. I was out on it. Joe made one of the savviest moves I've seen ever. He traded Zamir White for Kyron to like the Josh Jacobs owner in our other dynasty league, and Kyron's looking like currently to this day like you would have taken him with one of your first 5 picks in redraft if you knew you were going to get production. Like if you just removed the name and said this is production you get, Kyron is showing out, and then obviously Puka's dominating. So the Rams look great. Tampa Bay is looking surprisingly strong with Baker at the helm, going into New Orleans and winning. Baker over Carr right now seemed crazy before, but is easily take Baker over Carr at this moment. Carr has just killed Olave and saw some crazy catch. And I know Joe's going to touch upon this later, but the Kamara catches to yards, I think, is record breaking. I don't think anyone has ever had that much yardage with that many, like little yardage with that many catches before. I think it was like half before, so it wasn't even close. Texans look great. We'll get into that later. Patriots don't look good. They stink. It's just so bad. Every Patriot. There's not a useful Patriot out there.
I had them +7 every which way last weekend, and they were in that game for probably 6 fucking minutes of real time, not even of game time. By 12 minutes to go in the first quarter, I knew I was dead.
Yeah, that was Harry was letting us know that team is just not good. I think on the defense side they were strong, and I think they lost Judon, so they're
lost Judon. They lost one of their other safeties or cornerbacks. Can't the guy's name escapes me at the moment, but yeah, it's we're all hoping for Bailey Zappi actually getting the start, right? I mean, I would love Zappi. I haven't heard anything, but it seemed like when they brought him in there, he was actually moving the ball around a little bit more than Mac was. So,
I mean, the offense isn't moving, so yes, anyone moving the ball would be an improvement.
But one thing, real quick, just it's tough to to blame Mac when you look at the weapons he's throwing the ball to. I mean,
Yes.
Mac he stinks, but
He looks like an accountant
if
coming
you
from
if
people who studied accounting.
yeah, right, like the odds are severely stacked against him when he's got, like Kendrick Bourne and
Devontae Parker.
reports of Devontae Parker like being dragged out there to catch balls for him. So
Yeah, doesn't look good, but who does look good is the 49ers. Really just it's crazy. They just consolidated to CMC, just everything. I was playing against CMC in a redraft, and it was very frustrating to see like all the plays go to him. But I'll get into that later. But another player too, if it wasn't CMC, it was a little sprinkling of Ayuk, who is looking very, very good. The Jets honestly looked like better. I wish the Giants looked as good as the Jets looked. Basically, the Jets looked pretty solid. Zach Wilson put on a good showing. Might be streamable because he's playing the Broncos, who I mentioned. So I know one of our league mates is going to be starting Zach Wilson. It'll be entertaining to see how that comes out. And the Chiefs honestly don't look elite. I don't know how you guys feel about that. They're not bad, but they're not elite.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I don't know if the Jets are really any good, but I think it's more that the Chiefs just aren't as good as we're used to. I mean, literally, their wide receiver core is just almost non-existent outside of Kelsey. So I think the Chiefs are just having a very beatable year, and they don't look like the Chiefs that we've been used to for the last couple of years.
yeah, and I mean with the Chiefs, right? They're going to go as Mahomes goes, and Mahomes just, he's human. He just he pooped his pants a little on.
Yeah,
on
he threw a couple of ducks. It was just like, what
Taylor
is that
Swift
pass?
was up there, and Ryan Reynolds was up there, and he couldn't handle it. He pooped in his pants, but they still got the win. And the defense, I think, is better in Kansas City than it has
years
been.
for sure.
Yeah. So that might be the difference, but yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, they're a playoff team. It's just that when you go out, you thought they were going to smash that game, and it didn't happen. But speaking of smash, we are starting up a new segment on how we're going to run through players. We got some awards, some superlatives, if you will, to make things a little bit more fun. So we're going to do this each week, hopefully. It's a work in progress, but see how it goes. So first award, we're calling the Smash Williams Award. It's the week win stud. I'm going to just throw this one out because I alluded to before. Christian McCaffrey. Easy call. He just went bonkers. If you played against him, you're acutely aware of how bonkers he went. If you own him, there's like a 90% chance you probably won. The whole offense was basically running through him. He had 20 rushes, 106 yards, and 3 touchdowns. But, he also had 8 targets for 7 receptions, 71 yards, and another touchdown. I was watching the game, and it was like, every play, I was just, there's Christian McCaffrey making another play. And scoring another touchdown. That's great. And he could have even had a 5th touchdown. They gave Brock Purdy a QB sneak, basically, to get another touchdown, which honestly, I feel like they just knew that they were giving the mercy call on my team at that point because that probably should have gone to CMC. But yeah, Smash One and War, I'm giving it to CMC. What about you, Ryan?
Yeah, I'm giving mine to Josh Allen. He did what CMC couldn't do. He actually scored 5 touchdowns. So, 4 passing touchdowns, 1 rushing touchdown. He had 46.5 fantasy points in week 4. Usually we see fantasy points like that from a quarterback when they have a lot of rushing yards, and he actually only had 17 rushing yards. So, he hit almost 50 fantasy points with 17 rushing yards. Pretty impressive. If you had him, same as CMC, you probably won, maybe unless you were going against CMC. But most analysts had Mahomes over him at first overall in Dynasty Superflex rankings coming into the season. But I think right now it's Allen, and for anyone that took him first overall, they've been rewarded so far.
Are you talking about yourself, Ryan?
Maybe talking about myself. Let's go Buffalo.
What about you, Jeff?
He's going to run the ball. I mean, that's the thing, right? Like every year he goes into the season saying he's going to run the ball less, and then every year he continues to run the ball.
He's addicted to running the ball. He doesn't just run it. He seeks out contact and leaps over people.
That's why he's so entertaining to watch.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm gonna go with AJ Brown, just because I feel like you've kind of been waiting for this type of game. It's funny, like even after last week, which is kind of a ridiculous thing to say. One of my brothers, who was an AJ Brown owner in redrafts, was saying to me, is AJ Brown ever going to do anything? And it's tough to say that after a 14 target, 9 reception game, but then he comes out this week, 13 more targets, 9 more receptions, 2 touchdowns. He looks great, and after that weird Thursday night game against Minnesota where he only had 6 targets and was kind of making his voice heard a little bit about that. The squeaky wheel, as always, gets the grease, and with 27 targets over the last 2 games, I think he is going to continue to get fed the ball. So if you have AJ Brown, you're very happy right now.
I'd say so. So you're saying your brother did this? Okay, noted.
Yeah. This is Anthony in
This is
redraft.
Anthony's fault.
Who not that it matters. Nobody really cares about somebody.
Anthony's fault.
Yeah. I told him to draft Herbert over Fields in the first round. He didn't listen. And then I told him to draft AJ Brown. He did listen, and he was chirping in my ear because AJ wasn't getting it done, but he's getting it done.
There it is. The next award we're calling the He's All That. It's a solid depth piece player who may actually turn out to be a stud, kind of like the girl who took off her glasses and let her hair down is actually a smoke show. So, Ryan, why don't you start off with who you are giving the He's All That award to?
Yeah, so I gave it to Romeo Doubs. He's currently wide receiver 15 on the year. He received 13 targets in week 4, which led to 14 fantasy points, even though Christian Watson was back. He had 12 targets the week before that. He appears to have great chemistry with Jordan Love, and, Jordan Love, who was also drafted as a starter, but has also kind of surprised me. So even if Watson eats into some of his targets going forward, I still think he remains pretty relevant. And, he was drafted in a really, really late round. He was drafted in the 13th round, and ours, was considered nothing more than a bench option. So to have him sitting at wide receiver 15 right now, and it looks like he should still be targeted pretty heavily moving forward, he's all that.
What about you, Joe? I agree with that one.
I'm going to go with Adam Thielen, actually, who I know it doesn't feel good to put anyone from the Carolina Panthers in your lineup right now. With the type of quarterback play that they've had, I'm sure that Harry and Dan are hoping to see a little bit more out of Bryce Young. And if not, then I'm kind of hoping to see a little bit more of the Red Rifle out there.
Ooh, Andy Dalton.
But Thielen has been effective. I mean, he had a little poopy pants week 1, but since week 1, he's averaging 10 targets a game, a decent 10 or so yards per catch. He's had 2 touchdowns, and he, let's not forget, right? He's been a fantasy stud many times in the past, right? The last, 4 or 5 years in Minnesota, he's been a very, very strong fantasy asset. And I think he was just kind of the old busted this year. So Adam Thielen's probably one of those guys where if you have him on your dynasty team and your team stinks, or you're not going to be a contender, you should 100% be trading him to a contender for some sort of younger value.
Yes, that the consolidation of veterans, that is an exact perfect asset there that you should be shifting from a team that's rebuilding to a team that's contending.
Yeah.
For me, it's kind of a combo. I'm leaning more into Nico Collins, but it's very much tied to also CJ Stroud. Both these guys are looking like very high-end options currently, but they were both drafted very late to be more depth bench options. Nico, first of all, he just went off for 7 receptions for 168 and 2 touchdowns on 9 targets. He's currently the wide receiver 7 on the year, and he's commanding targets with an absurd 19.5 yards per catch, which is just crazy. This guy is just bigger than everyone on the field. He's always been a Matt Harmon darling, and someone who I always drafted as well because I addicted to those big, fast receivers on the XS, just like a throwback type of player, and he's showing out right now. But the reason why he's also able to show out is CJ Stroud looks incredible. Like Ohio State quarterbacks have been getting a lot of blowback, or because the stigma relates to them because they haven't really showed out in the NFL, and he is completely changing the narrative there. He's currently on pace to shatter NFL passing records for rookies. The current record is 4,374 by Andrew Luck. He's on pace for 5,151 yards through 4 games, and he has no interceptions and 6 touchdowns on 151 attempts. He's reading the defense well. He's making credible throws, and he's sustaining fantasy success for these wide receivers, which usually rookie quarterbacks can't do. So these two guys, CJ Stroud was probably on your taxi squad or maybe your third quarterback because you drafted him rookie draft, and Nico Collins is probably a wide receiver 4 or 5. They are studs now that they are going to be every week play. So they're getting my He's All That award. Moving to the Doug Flutie Hail Mary Award. This is the dart throw streamer that kind of saved the week for you. Kind of came out of nowhere. But going to toss this over the Rye Dogs first.
Yeah, so I wrote down a couple names for this one. I initially wrote David Montgomery. Not that he came out of nowhere, but he had 33 fantasy points in week 4. That was after he missed week 3 and was questionable going into the game. So there was a lot of speculation that he would be limited. I know some people probably even had him on their bench as a result. And it was painful if you did, because the Lions gave him a full workload right out of the bat, right first game back. So, he was kind of my first initial guy.
That would be me leaving him on the bench. So
I did in one league as well.
I'm with you. Yeah. I mean, he's the first name that came to my mind too for that same reason. So.
Yeah, he wasn't expected to do what he did, but then you got 33 fantasy points from him. So, but then I decided to also go with Jonnu Smith, who has kind of come out of nowhere here, and to me is a real streamer that could have given you some fantasy success. He had 15 and a half fantasy points, finished as the number 3 tight end. He wasn't even on benches to start the season. Kyle Pitts was the clear-cut number 1 tight end, but somehow here we are week 4, and not only is he outscoring Pitts, but he was the leading receiver on the Falcons with 95 yards. More than
I picked him up last week. He was just floating out there on waivers.
Yeah, exactly. So, some people might have picked him up after weeks 2 and 3 because he did have some points there, but I doubt anyone actually started him in week 4.
No, he's Jonnu Smith. No one's starting him.
Yeah, but if you did, he gave you some great production, and going forward, if they keep using him like this, who knows? He could be startable.
Yeah, I picked him up for a bye-week fill-in in the Dynasty this upcoming week. So, and honestly, exactly. I feel pretty confident. I'd much rather have him in there than Kyle Pitts right now.
Yeah, what is going on in Atlanta?
Non-existent. It's crazy.
What about you, Joe?
Yeah, for me, it's probably Khalil Herbert, because it felt like a Hail Mary to play Khalil Herbert going into this week after half-point performances of 9, 6, and 2 points the first 3 weeks. Hadn't gotten more than 9 carries. Had 7 the last 2 weeks, and it's a shame because when he gets the ball, he's running for over 5 a carry. They just don't give him the ball. They'd rather granted they're usually in a negative game script, but it was good to see him get right against an atrocious Denver defense. Was on the field for almost twice as many snaps as he had been in week 1. And I hope that the Bears will kind of look at this and say, we got to get Khalil Herbert the ball more. We got to focus a little bit more in the run game, get the ball out of Justin Fields' hands, and stop letting him hurt us with his, passing. And that's obviously coming from somebody who has some shares of Khalil Herbert and wants to see him succeed. But I had zero confidence putting him in the lineup this week, and he came through. So
Yeah, I agree with that one. As also someone who has multiple shares of Khalil Herbert, he just was a value in drafts and was not looking like that the first 3 weeks, but hopefully he is now. For me, it's another combo, cheating a little bit, but again, these guys feel a little bit tied together. The main one is Michael Wilson, rookie wide receiver for the Cardinals. He was a third round rookie. He got a little hype in the pre-draft. Oh, he got very little hype in the pre-draft process before the NFL draft, but after the draft, started getting some hype because when an NFL team uses day two draft capital, you kind of pay attention there. And the wide receiver class, very small. He's not. He's a true receiver at 6'2 and 213 with solid athleticism. And the reason he fell, he had a lot of injuries in college at Stanford, but he did produce when he was on the field. And the reason why there was some hype after the draft is you look at the other competition in Arizona, and it's really just Hollywood. There's not other receiving targets there. So there's a pretty clear path. And now that's actually coming to fruition. You start seeing his snap count increase over the past 3 weeks. And this week, finally, I doubt anyone started him, but he got 7 targets and he earned those targets. And he went 7 for 76 and 2 touchdowns. And they were very solid routes he ran. The second touchdown, he actually split 2 defenders, got hit and going in the end zone. So these are big boy touchdowns. And he actually may even get higher quality targets later in the season. He's going to keep getting more and more target share, but Kyler maybe come back if and when, we don't know still. So those targets could improve by quality, but who knows? Because the other guy, Joshua Dobbs, this guy before the season was definitely on your waivers. I don't care what format. He got traded right before the season started. He is so invaluable that the Cardinals didn't even have his jersey on the customized jersey kiosk at their team store. And he had to literally go on Twitter for them to add it to it. So he was in waivers in his own team, effectively. But he has turned around and made this a very frisky Cardinals team who was supposed to be the worst team in the NFL. He is currently QB 16, completing 71% of his passes and rushing for at least 40 yards each of the last 3 weeks. And the last 2 weeks were against two of the most elite defenses in the Cowboys and the 49ers. He's getting the job done, and you just scooped him off for literally nothing, and you could easily throw him in as your QB2 in a super flex. So those were the Hail Mary dart throws from me, the Cardinal boys. Moving on, we got the Ferrari in a trailer park. So, despite a bad matchup or situation, whether it be bad QB, bad team, whatever it is, this player still seemingly got the job done and provided value for you in this past week. And I'll start because this is my boy, Sam Howell. I started him last week. Was very bad. He had negative 0.4 points. So you were definitely expecting this to be another negative game for him going up against what was expected to be a very strong Eagles defense. And I think many people were expecting the Eagles be potentially the top scoring defense in fantasy this week, but not so fast there because Sam Howell, his biggest issue the week before is he kept holding on to the ball for way too long and throwing up ducks when he did get rid of it. In just a week, he got the coaching and he seemingly got the ball out of his hands much faster. He got sacked 9 times last week, still got sacked 4 times this week. Again, it's a strong D line, but he threw for 290 yards and a touchdown on 71% completion rate, and he ran for another 40 yards on 6 rushing. So he stepped up. He didn't throw any picks, and if you had him, I think he ended up being a very solid QB2. I think he ended up around the QB 13 on the week. So definitely a solid contribution from my boy Sam Howell. But what about you, Joe? Who you got for the Ferrari in a trailer park?
Yeah, it was a good bounce back from Howell. It was good to see. I'm going to go with Alvin Kamara. He's my Ferrari in a trailer park because the team looked disgusting. Kamara actually looked disgusting. Derek Carr looked very, very injured, and yet he still was targeted 14 times. Even if you're only pulling in, 2 yards per catch, like he pulled in this game, you're still going to get decent points, even in half point per reception leagues. I mean, like 14 targets is incredible volume for a running back. So
Turned
I
out
was
to be 13 catches for 33 yards, too, just to
yeah,
put how bad that is.
incredible ineptitude. But I think part of it too is the fact that at a certain point the defense realized that Derek Carr couldn't throw the ball, and he was just stepping back and checking it down the entire game. But so long story short, right? He's got an AC joint sprain, Carr, which is not a long-term injury. So hopefully he's able to get the ball around the field in the near future. If not, hopefully we see Jameis Winston out there, who will
We all want
continue
to
to
see.
be a pick machine, but he'll also get the ball around the field
I
significantly
didn't
better
see
than
it, but I
Burrow.
heard he threw one pass in the game, and it was an interception.
Yeah,
Love
well,
it.
he
Classic
literally
Jameis.
took it, and you could just tell he's like, "I'm fucking throwing this
I'm
downfield."
this is
He
my
isn't
chance.
bombs it up into double coverage. It was the most classic James throw of all
Oh, I
time.
love it.
But yeah, I think Kamara, it's not always going to be pretty. In fact, this week it was gross, but you could have done a lot worse. So
That's right. What about you, Rye?
Yeah, so I went with John Robinson. He had 16 fantasy points in week 4, despite the Falcons losing 23-7. He had over 100 yards rushing and another 30 yards through the air on 5 catches. You know, we just talked about the Falcons a little bit earlier. Jonnu Smith was the leading receiver. I feel like this team is a disaster, and I watched that whole London game. They looked pretty bad. Ritter had 2 interceptions. One was returned for a touchdown.
Did you watch in Toy Story mode or real mode?
No, I actually watched in real mode, but I heard some of you may have watched it in Toy Story mode.
Yeah,
So.
we'll break. My son doesn't like me watching football a lot. He wants to watch his own shows, but the Toy Story mode he was into and kept asking for. So it was the only way I was able to watch football with him in the room. So
I mean, that's a win-win, right? You at least can say you watched the game. So
yeah, it was glitchy, but it was better than nothing.
yeah, I heard it was pretty cool, and I could see kids liking it. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he's my Ferrari in a trailer park because I feel like the Falcons are a mess right now, but he's still putting up very serviceable fantasy points for you.
Oh yeah, and this week I think he gets the Texans, who are sieve on the run D, so he might go for 200 yards.
Yeah, and you can even just see watching the game when he touches the ball, the announcer is almost like gas because he's just so electric with the ball in his hands.
Yeah, he does things you don't expect anyone to do. It's incredible, and he's just so powerful with it too. Like he is elite. I get why people are talking about him being generational.
Yeah, for sure.
Moving down to the next award, this is the 28-3 award. The score of the Falcons, which we just talked about, and Patriots Super Bowl score at halftime. It's the biggest dead letdown award because obviously we all know now they end up losing that game. So, which was the biggest dud or letdown for you, Rye Dogs?
I went with Joe Burrow. I know we already talked about him a little bit, and it's most likely due to injury. But the reason I went with him is because I feel like if you own him, you still have to start him, or at least up to this point, you've felt like you have to start him. And if you've started him, you know, he's had 0 touchdowns in 3 out of 4 weeks. He had 4 points in week 4. And he just doesn't look healthy. So he's currently the QB 31 on the year. He's just been a huge letdown week after week, and it's tough to sit someone that is such a big name and that you invested such high draft capital into. But you know, I think going forward, you might have to start considering him if you have another decent option because he just doesn't look healthy out there.
Got to ask for next week or week 5, are we going to start Joe Burrow against the Cards or Zach Wilson against the Broncos? Dude. Both you guys, who you starting?
I would start Burrow.
I think I would too, but that's the thing. It's not like a super easy answer. Like
there's no winning in starting Zach Wilson there. Like even if you lose it, like you're like, oh, it was Burrow. I had to start him.
He might actually be the only quarterback in the entire league who I would start Burrow over at this point. Like I think any other quarterback, I like. There's See, the thing is, right? Like, you'd have to be in a dynasty making that decision. Like, I have
Oh,
Burrow
yeah.
in a dynasty, and I have Garoppolo on the bench, and I'm benching Burrow for Garoppolo. If you're in a redraft, though, there are significantly better options on the waiver
Yeah.
wire than Zach Wilson. So Burrow is firmly getting attached to the pine until he demonstrates that he can throw touchdowns again.
Yeah. Man, that offense is so sad. Joe, who is your 28-3 award?
Yeah, so I'm gonna go with Jahmyr Gibbs, and I've been very disappointed by everything that I've seen from the Lions' usage of Gibbs so far this season. It's not necessarily a reflection on the player. He has definitely flashed, and he looks explosive at times. He also looks like he's getting kind of stuffed up. Like he's not a huge back, right? So they try and run him up the middle, and he sometimes doesn't have a ton of success. I know overall his yards per carry numbers are in the 4 or 5 range, kind of what you like to see. But the usage is what's killing me, right? Like, you're talking about a second round draft capital pick in redraft, and he's only averaging like between 35 and 40% of snaps when Montgomery's healthy. Even in the game Montgomery missed, he only played 60% of snaps. Montgomery is getting all the carries inside the goal line. He's getting a significantly more volume. I just think that this offense has a sneaky large number of mouths to feed. And when you kind of think about Amon-Ra St. Brown, and now we're going to add Jameson Williams into the mix, and a dominant RB1.
He's not getting many targets. Don't worry about it.
Maybe he does. Right? Like,
2 targets, tops.
What concerns me about Jameson Williams coming back is, like, you kind of wanted Jahmyr Gibbs to play that role of he's only going to get a couple of these like high impact targets that he's hopefully going to turn into explosive plays and or touchdowns for your team. And if now he's sharing those with Jameson Williams, even if there's only 4 to go around, and he's going from getting 3 of them to getting 2 of them, like, it's not going to be good when he's already, 2 of the 4 weeks he's only gotten 2 targets. Hasn't scored a touchdown yet. His highest performance on the season is at 23rd overall, right? So, like, the very, very, very bottom barrel RB2. And yeah, I mean, like, in redraft, you paid second round draft capital, and he has less half PPR points than Khalil Herbert, who we just talked about, Zach Moss, Jerome Ford, Rashad White, a lot of like just mediocre shit running backs who went in the mid rounds, who you weren't really expecting a lot from. And, I know it's a long season, but what this kind of reminds me of a little bit is the Rams backfield. I don't know what the actual year was, but when Cam Akers was a rookie, there was a lot of Cam Akers hype coming out of camp, and he ended up getting drafted pretty high. I mean, not second round high, but he ended up getting drafted pretty high. And then Darrell Henderson ended up just kind of dominating the carries and the touchdowns and everything all season. And then in the playoffs, Akers was a stud. And going into the next season, it was like, oh, Akers is going to be like, the one of the top running backs, and then he tore his ACL or tore his Achilles in camp, and here we are with Akers. But I think it could be a similar situation where you're frustrated by Gibbs during the season, and then end of season, playoffs into next year, he finally kind of gets involved more in the offense to do a little bit more. But right now, he's just a small piece of the pie, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, I own Monty everywhere. I think it like 100% ownage, I think. So I've been very happy with this. But it does stink seeing a player that electric not getting the usage, especially when you saw the reaction they had when they drafted him. Makes no sense. For me, the 28-3 award is going to Jordan Addison, who just put up a goose. He had 1 target and didn't catch it. So it gave you 0 points and made no sense because this looks like a matchup that he should have feasted on. The Panthers D in the secondary is not overly strong. You're not really scared of it. And Cousins started the game with a pick 6, so they were behind. They had to throw. and they just didn't to Addison. It made no sense what was going on there. The somewhat alarming thing there too is that there was a significant drop in his snap percentage too. The first 3 weeks it kept increasing from 56 to 69 to 71, and then dropped down to 58. So he wasn't a overly high usage, but that's like somewhat healthy from a rookie. But it's weird to see that step back in that game script and that low of usage. I'm not overly concerned long term, but definitely not what you want to see. Because I thought this was going to be potentially one of his biggest outputs of the year. And then just an honorable mention, Chris Olave went 1 for 4 on 6 targets, but that's more Carr, as we kind of mentioned, because he was just throwing, I think, negative yard passes to Kamara because he just can't get it down to Olave and Olave feast on the air yardage. So, yeah, that was just bad. But hopefully better days are ahead for Olave.
I think the only thing I'll add on Addison, though, Dave, is I think Carr only completed like 10 passes or something like that. So there should definitely be some
Cousins, you mean?
for him. Or Cousins, sorry, yeah. He only completed like 10 or 12 passes that whole entire game. So I think that's part of it. But
Cousins was bad.
Yeah, Cousins was bad. So
yeah, somehow won that game, but yeah, they're bad. The last award that we have is the You're Not That Guy,
pal. Trust me, you're not that guy.
Yeah, this is a performance that was just so bad that we are now reassessing their value going forward. I'll start off real quick. Ramondre Stevenson. I'm a Ramondre guy. I have a lot, so this hurts a lot. He just has not been good this year. He's averaging 2.73 yards per carry on 60 attempts. He hasn't eclipsed 60 yards rushing yet in a single game. Last year, he averaged 4.95 yards per carry on 210 attempts, and the year before, even a little over 4.5 yards per attempt. So the efficiency is just gone this year so far. And you also compare that against his running mate, Zeke, who's much older, same offensive line. He's averaging 4.06 yards per carry. So something's off there. Obviously, Ramondre is getting a little bit more work, but still, Zeke's getting it done and Ramondre's not. You're also not seeing the targets that Ramondre was getting last year. That was a big part of his game. He was getting all the receptions, all the checkdowns. The past 3 games, his target totals were 3, 4, and 3. And he only caught 60% of those too. So you're not getting the half point or full point PPR points that you expect to get out of Ramondre. He has had a very rough schedule to start, and it doesn't stop this week against the Saints. So maybe better days are ahead, but I am very, very concerned when I thought at first you had, at the very least, a mid to potentially upside RB1. You're hoping more of an RB2 going forward. So he's getting my You're Not That Guy award. What about you, Rye?
Yeah, so I mean, I agree with you there on Stevenson. We actually traded him away for Madison, hoping we were getting an upgrade there, but Madison also hasn't looked that great himself, so it's kind of a wash. But
he's looked better than Stevenson.
But
he's had more than 60 yards rushing.
Yeah. But for my You're Not That Guy, I went with the Jones brothers because both of them have just looked terrible. So we'll start with Mac Jones. He was serviceable through week 3, but week 4 was bad. He finished with negative fantasy points, and he was actually benched in the blowout loss. He threw 2 interceptions before he was benched. We talked about it a little bit already. Maybe Zappy comes in, but they did announce he'll remain the starter for now, so we'll see how long that lasts. But it seems like he's fighting for his job. And then Daniel Jones,
breaks my heart.
Yikes. That one hurts me as well. Obviously, I was super high on him. I really thought he was going to have like a top 5 year, but boy, was I wrong. He's had 3 out of 4 weeks with less than 5 fantasy points.
But that 1 week, QB1, just saying.
But that's really just a huge second half against the Cardinals, so I don't know if we can really count that for too much.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, week 4, 2 interceptions, no touchdowns, fumbled, was sacked 11 times. And he was forgiven by a lot of people for weeks 1 and 3 because he went against the 49ers and the Cowboys, who are great defenses. But you have to start to wonder if last year was more of a fluke and he's actually not that good.
Yeah, I mean, I don't blame Daniel Jones completely. The offensive line is like an utter mess. Like, he has no time to
Yeah.
do anything. He doesn't have really any true weapons to throw to. It's all slot receivers. But he's also been making mistakes, not reading things. And part of it, it's you feel like when you've been tackled that many times and sacked that many times, you start speeding up the game a bit too much, and you're not thinking it straight. So, and that's kind of what you saw like on that pick six at the game. He's just like he just knows he's going to get tackled, so he just has to throw it out. Still, not what you want to see your current franchise quarterback. It's just painful. It's crazy that 14 out of the 16 quarters this year, like the Giants are just the worst stats ever. I think they led for 19 seconds all season so far. Like, it's just insane the bad stats that the Giants have right now.
Something like they've led for 19 seconds, which somehow they won the game. But yeah, they've led for 19 seconds in 4 weeks. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's gross. I hate it. I hate it so much.
It's so weird too because, I mean, I'm going to reserve judgment on Jones until they get Andrew Thomas back. They also lost rookie. He's a rookie. The guy's playing center for them. He ended up going down in the first quarter of the game against Seattle.
Yep.
So, early in the game, they had Waller kind of in the backfield doing a lot of blocking, which seemed to be working. So, look, you can't telegraph the passes to your first read like he did on the interception. And, I mean, obviously, he should know at this point of his career to be scrambling with two hands on the ball when he's has the most lost fumbles of any quarterback since he came into the league. But, the pass protection is when he's throwing the ball, when he has time to throw the ball, he looks good. But it's just, he's another one where, I don't know what the situation with Andrew Thomas is. I know he had that weird. He practiced limited on Thursday and then didn't practice at all Friday. So it was like, did he re-aggravate? Did he just get out there and realize that the hammy wasn't good to go? Unless they're playing a team that has absolutely no ability to rush the passer, then you're probably putting him on the bench for the near term too.
I'm pretty sure every team can rush the passer against the Giants. Unfortunately,
someone's going to be able to.
Yeah.
So for me, rather than to pick specific guys, I just kind of call this my shit list of the week. I think maybe we'll keep this going as a recurring segment. And these are guys that I would toss in the trash bin, not have on your roster,
compost or
under any circumstance until further notice. And I want you guys to let me know if you agree, right? Like, do these guys, like, to me, none of these guys deserve a roster spot under any circumstance right now. So, number one, Kyle Pitts. What do we think?
In Dynasty, yes.
I guess that's what we're talking about.
Yeah. Sorry, redraft. But yeah, so
redraft. I don't need him in redraft.
Yeah. Honestly, in Dynasty, if he puts up like a big week with a touchdown or two, like I might try and sell because it's concerning. It was like, for a while it was free Kyle Pitts, and now it's like, well, Jonnu Smith seems to be a lot more open, and maybe it's a Kyle Pitts thing.
I feel like it's more of the routes that they're running. I think John is just running shorter routes that they're thrown to, where Kyle Pitts is like running downfield more.
And Desmond Ridder
and Ridder can't hit it. So that's what I think is really happening.
He's the worst quarterback in the league. He's the second quarterback that I would start Joe Burrow over in the NFL.
Yeah, that's what I would.
He stinks.
Yeah. Kyle Pitts just needs to be on a different team, but yeah.
Number two on the shit list. Go ahead.
For Pitts, though, like, when does that even change? Like, if you have him in Dynasty, like, are you just going to sit around and wait for a couple years? I just don't see it.
Would if I couldn't get value in a trade. But he's like 22, 23 years old. Still, like, he's got a decade in the NFL in him still. As long as
his prime of being like Kyle Pittsy, like what he was supposed to be coming out of college, like that athletic wide receiver.
Like another 7 years.
Yeah. But he's going to be in this garbage Atlanta offense for another.
Yeah, that's the thing. You're stuck.
Desmond Ridder won't be. There's no possible way. I would put $1 million that he will not be the starting quarterback for the Falcons or any team next year. So you just got to hope that the situation improves in the near term.
Dave wants to take that bet.
I hope so. I have Pitts in another Dynasty league, and I paid up a lot to get him, so I kind of need this to turn out.
Yeah.
I mean, Raider stinks. Next on the shit list, Van Jefferson. I mean, this guy is on the field for like 90% of snaps, and he's like fourth year in the offense. You think he would have some sort of a rapport with Matt Stafford, and he just stinks. He can't get open. When he does get open, he drops the ball. Get him off my team. Josh Kelly stinks. They have these like backs that I've never heard of before in my life. They sound like they came in off the street, just gouging Vegas for 20, 30, 40 yards last week, and then they bring Josh Kelly in, and he looks like he's running in quicksand.
I had Josh Kelly for the past, but not this past week, but the 2 weeks before that, thinking he would be great, especially against the Vikings. Started in both those weeks, did nothing. I didn't even care who I was picking up. I was like, this guy is just getting dropped. I am not ever playing this guy ever again. Get him out of here.
And that's kind of what we saw from him the last couple years when he had the opportunity. I almost put Josh Palmer on the list instead. He's like on the verge of being on my shit list because he's another one who consistently gets the opportunity, and it's just
he's the wide receiver version of Josh Kelly.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah. Like I could not possibly think of a soundbite better.
I was not trying to pick up Josh. I've done this before. I know what he does. It's just you keep starting because like he should be good. Like the matchup's great. There's no one else. No, he is just bad at football.
Next on the list, Dalvin Cook, another one who looks like he's running in quicksand. Like he looks like he has like 30-pound weights tied to his ankles. He is just, not only is he slow and in a situation where he's going to be in like weird game script for the entire season. But so here's the thing about Cook, right? Like if you're either starting him this week against Denver, or you're cutting him and you're never looking back, right? Like if you have him and he's on your bench and you're not playing him this week, then with 4 teams on bye and the best possible running back matchup of all time, then cut him, let him go. So I mean, I personally think he's toast. I didn't even bother putting him on the trade block in my dynasty where I have him because what can I get for him at this point? Like a fucking 4th round pick at best. I think he's done.
I'd rather have the 4th.
Yeah, he's cooked.
And last but not least, and this one might be a little harsh, but Antonio Gibson.
Yeah,
the guy's killing me. I mean, like Brian Robinson looks significantly better. Gibson is dropping the ball. He's running into the quarterback. He can't get a clean hand
going into the season too.
Yeah,
I know. I had him in redraft, and I actually did just drop him. So I completely agree with that one. You can't start him right now. So what are you going to do with him?
It's tough when you see a running back in the same offense having so much success, and you're just like, honestly, like you're running behind the same line, you're running the same plays, so you must just not be good.
Yep.
Yeah. So that concludes my shit list of the week, and we'll be back next week for the next installment of Joey's shit list of the week.
Yeah, I hope everyone enjoyed that segment. I thought that was pretty fun myself. We'll get some fun drops in there. Now moving over, just give a quick update on how our league of record, the Nonstop Fantasy Weekly Dynasty League, is progressing. An update on the high and low through week 4. Week 4, the Wilkinson brothers actually put up the highest score of the week with 165, and Clark and Sauce, that's what I'm calling them now, put up the low with 82, but neither of those scores were able to take over the lead in those respective categories. The top score still goes to Kropa with 177, and the Wilkinson brothers still have the low with 63. So I'm telling you, that is going to be a hard low to beat, but with buys coming up, we'll start seeing what happens.
That's my hope. We've had 2 teams close the last 2 weeks, and that's without buys. So, I'm hoping with some bye weeks, someone will beat it.
My low is basically with buys, though. I didn't even have enough IR spots that week. Like I had too many guys that were out. I literally picked up 3 guys off of waivers in Dynasty and started them.
If there's any week that I have a chance to eclipse that low score, then this is the week. It's gross. Miles Sanders has a groin issue going on. Jamar Chase, we talked about that offense. I'm starting 2 tight ends, and one of them's Dallas Goddard, who is seriously waiver wire fodder, and Russell Wilson had a good week last week, but again, going up against the Jets, I don't know. I feel like it's a good week to be going against Kropa because I'm not going to put up a good number, and maybe I'll
Just mail
just
it
get
in. Yeah.
annihilated. Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. You don't want to put up a good week and lose. So
Yeah.
get the bad week out now.
Just got to, what's the number I got to beat? 60?
63. You got to go below. I think it's like 62.9 or something like that. But
yeah, I'll beat that.
And on the other side of it, we're coming for Kroop's high score. We've gotten close.
You've done it twice. So, you and Kroop are the only ones so far who have won the weekly high. So hopefully someone else takes it. With that said, a quick update, I guess, on the division. So this was our first week of non-divisional play. So you can start seeing what some of that true strengths across the league are. And Division 3 got swept. Went 0-3, so a tough showing for them. Division 2 is actually looking real strong, which is both of your divisions. There is no team below 500 in that division. So definitely going to be a tight race there to see who wins that one. And the leaders of our divisions, Kroop is still holding it down, and the team mandated male masseuses, which is my division. Adam Cohn is currently the leader in Division 2. He's the only team at 3-1, with the other three at 2-2. And Division 3, Matt and Dan Rosinski are holding it down with 3-1. Each team has a different record in that division, but I think all of us are pretty much comfortable that Matt and Dan are probably going to take that one there. But moving ahead for this, who do you think are some of the make or break teams right now that this week is going to kind of decide their season for them? What games are you watching?
In our league or
in our league?
Yeah, so in our league, and Ryan, I know you have this down in the doc, but I think the big one this week is Team Rosinski versus Team Cohen. Actually hoping for Team Rosinski to come through and get a win there. It's because Adam's team obviously is strong in our division, and if he gets a win against a strong team like Dan and Matt, then puts him in a good spot. So I think we'll be rooting for myself and Wilk will both be rooting for Team Rosinski.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a big matchup for both of them. If Dan's team wins, they probably take another game lead over their division. And if Adam wins, he stays in front of ours. But if Adam loses, it's really big for our division because, the three other teams are all 2-2 right behind him. So a loss there, the standings could really shake up in our division if he loses. So go Rosinskis.
Yeah, and I don't have too much because it does look like Kroop, who is leading my division, has quite the favorable matchup currently. I'm trying to just keep pace with him, but he definitely has the points scored tiebreaker over me by a significant margin. So just trying to keep pace with him. Hopefully he'll slip up later down, and then it'll be interesting to see kind of what happens for me at least, Dan and DaCosta going up against Caffer and Mike Williams. Both these teams are teetering on potentially having to go into a rebuild, and this matchup will kind of help push one of these teams in that direction. So I think that is one matchup to watch. Same thing kind of with the Schluter and Scott matchup as well. Scott is already kind of leaning towards potentially rebuilding. Schluter he was all of our favorites to be one of the best teams, but 2-2 and could potentially slip to 2-3 might change his outlook moving forward. So we'll see what happens there. Moving into, I guess, the NFL, just before we close things out, going to week 5, I know we just talked about a lot of players that we were feeling good about or not feeling good about. Are there any matchups or certain players you're watching to kind of see what trends are happening coming into week 5? I know we have a Thursday night game, and that for me is very interesting with it's to see what Khalil Herbert is actually going to do against the Commanders, as Joe mentioned, to see if his production this past week was real. So that's something I'll be keeping an eye on. But I don't know if you guys have anything else you're looking at.
Yeah, I just had the Cowboys and 49ers game down. I think, that's a big Sunday night matchup. Two pretty good teams, should be a good game. And, we'll see if the CMC show can do what he's been doing against the Cowboys defense. I think it'll be a good game to watch.
Yeah, and I'm interested to see the Eagles and Rams is one where, I think there's probably going to be, obviously not surprisingly from my take earlier, I think Eagles are a team that are probably undervalued in the market. Rams, a team maybe overvalued in the market, but also be interesting to see if Cooper Kupp does play. Is, like Matt Stafford, I think only has maybe 1 or 2 passing touchdowns all season, right? Like, does Cooper Kupp coming back mean that, regardless of where the targets go in between the 20s, like when they get back close to the end zone, is it Kupp getting all the red zone targets again? So I'm interested to see that game from a fantasy standpoint on the Rams side, and probably because I'll have money on Philly from a real life perspective.
Yeah, and one final one. How many points do you think the Giants are going to give up to the Dolphins? I think 1 million. I think all these players are just going to run circles. HN might go for 200, Tyreek 400. I don't know. It's just going to be a bloodbath.
It probably won't be great.
Yeah. I don't know how many Miami's going to score, but I can tell you how many the Giants are going to score, and it's few.
Minimal. Very minimal. Yeah, so with that negative vibes on our Giants, we're going to start closing out the show. I want to thank everyone again for listening to the pod. Really, really appreciate it. Good luck with your matchups. Keep fighting through. Again, it's early in the season. There's a lot of season left, so we'll be with you throughout.
Episode of the NSFW Dynasty podcast. Tune in next time.